You are now listening to the Unscripted Ohio Podcast, brought to you by Buckeye Grove and in part by JFQ Lending. All your home purchase and refinance needs should be handled by a Buckeye. You'll never pay for your appraisal with these guys. Licensed in 33 states and more on the way. Check them out at jfqlending.com. For the latest news, notes, analysis, and discussion, check us out on BuckeyeGrove.com and follow us on Twitter at UnscriptedOhio1. Now, broadcasting from Podcast Central, a place that is not his mother's basement.
Hey, Mom! We get some meatloaf!
We promise. Here's your host, Kyle Lamb.
Hey, Mom! The meatloaf!
Uh-oh. Sounds like somebody's got a case of the Mondays.
Good Monday, everybody. Somebody does have a case of the Mondays. If you are a Nebraska Cornhusker fan, you have seriously got a case of the Mondays right now. In what was a heavily hyped, heavily promoted game, Nebraska took it on the chin again in Memorial Stadium on Saturday. 48-7, Ohio State ran roughshod over the Nebraska Cornhuskers. I am your host, Kyle Lamb. This is the Unscripted Ohio Podcast. This is the Unscripted Ohio Podcast Network, the network that is chosen by 9 out of 10 Buckeye fans. That's not actual real research, but, it sounds good. But in seriousness, I am glad that you are back listening to the Unscripted Ohio Podcast. We are brought to you by Buckeye Grove, as well as JFQ Lending, and, of course, support also by GoBus. Ohio's rural intercity bus system can bring you to Columbus for Ohio State sporting events with over 40 stops to locations across the state. Visit them at ridegobus.com or call them 1-888-95-GO-BUS. Speaking of transportation, my man Johnny Lunsford, Johnny Bullitt, co-host of the Scarlet and Grape podcast, is joining me today. And Johnny is coming to Columbus this weekend. We are not making it over to Ohio Stadium to watch the game in person, but we do have a little bit of a viewing party going on. We're going to watch Ohio State, Michigan State Saturday night, along with our man, Chris Drew, host of the Dog Days podcast. And Johnny, that should be a lot of fun, right?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to meeting a Browns fan in person and trying not to get, assaulted or harassed or whatever happens. I've only heard stories. I've never actually met one in person. So, I'm a little nervous, but I think you'll protect me. And it's a lot of transportation. For those of you that you mentioned that, those of you that are listening on Monday, I'll be driving all day from the coast of Virginia Beach, basically all the way to my family's home in Southern Ohio. So I'll have time to be alone with my thoughts and some Audible.
Well, I'm going to give you some friendly advice because we are friends and you're coming all this way to just see me, nothing more, right?
Yeah.
So I am going to return the favor. As long as you don't wear a Pittsburgh Steelers jersey, you should be fine.
Yeah, I've never been to prison, so I don't own one, so I'll be all right.
Gosh, I don't want to alienate half of our audience already. It's too early for that.
Yeah. As a Southern Ohioan, I didn't deal with a whole lot of Browns or Steelers fans, but I do understand there's a healthy population in Ohio. I think you'll have to protect me for anybody that sees me on the streets in Columbus, Kyle.
Johnny, actually, that seems like a good time for just a quick personal testimony, like how you got out of Southern Ohio and how long you've been gone, because I know some people will be like, well, what's he doing in Virginia and what's he doing as an Ohio State guy?
Oh, yeah, I appreciate that, an opportunity to tell that story. So, yeah, I have some time off because I joined the Navy in 2008 out of Ohio. First time ever on an airplane, guys, was flying from the Columbus airport to boot camp in Great Lakes, Illinois, 2008. And, just got medically retired from the Navy, so I'm using my vacation days, and I'm headed back over to see some family, see you guys hang out. Perfect timing, football season. And for everybody that was already aware on Twitter, Instagram, that have reached out and thanked me for my service, I appreciate all of you. It's been a pleasure, and I'm ready for the next chapter.
Well, I will add to that. Thank you for your service, Johnny, and it should be a lot of fun. Hopefully, this will be several years of us doing this podcast thing because I don't know about you, but I'm having a lot of fun here as Unscripted Ohio grows. And Despite the shenanigans by our friend Corey, we are plowing onward and upward.
Yeah, you said it right. In spite of Corey, I'm having a lot of fun. That means we're really onto something. When you can wear a 200-pound ball and chain and still be having fun, then well, he'll kill me. 188 pounds. He's been working hard. So, but yeah, it is fun. I appreciate you putting the network together, Kyle. And yeah, I'm here for the ride.
Well, we won't let him get us down. So, Johnny, Ohio State looked like a. I'm not even going to sugarcoat it. They looked like a juggernaut on Saturday. What were your thoughts about this Ohio State game against Nebraska? And is there any reason whatsoever that we should not be celebrating this Ohio State team right now because they look insanely good?
There's no reason at all to try to water this victory down, uh, manipulate it in any way. Now, I want to, just so I hope it gets to the team's ears so they stay motivated. But this is this was amazing. I mean, I called the score, I think 42-21, and I wasn't even close. 38-0 by halftime. Every phase of the game was dominant. It was look, Nebraska was good enough to cause headaches. They absolutely were. They're not a great team. They're still finding their way. They're still in transition, but they were a lot better than what. I mean, there's not very many teams in the country, maybe not any, that would have done what we did to them. I think you can maybe, the coaching staff, perfectionists might want to say, Taylor Martinez threw a few bad balls that he usually doesn't throw. Nebraska, Kyle, could have hung up 21. So I guess if you're a Debbie Downer, you can say we won 48-21. How terrible.
Johnny, I was texting with a few friends throughout that game, and I was just astonished because Ohio State was just methodically picking them apart in every facet of the game. They were getting to Adrian Martinez. They had him thrown off his back foot. They were winning the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball. They had, I mean, they were just doing anything that they wanted to do with Nebraska. And I told my friends, I'm like, this is almost such a shocking blowout that I felt bad. It was kind of boring at times because it's just like I expected Ohio State to win pretty convincingly. I thought it was going to be an impressive showing, but that was just humiliating. I never thought that Nebraska was back, but I didn't think that there was still that much of a difference between Ohio State and Nebraska. A decent team, but that was just that was a good old fashioned butt whipping.
It was, and maybe so much so that it detracts from the Buckeyes a little bit because you've seen the narrative already. They're lumping Nebraska's name in, Kyle, with the other teams that we have beaten, and I do think it's the best teams we've played so far. I told Corey on our show, look, if we win by 21, that's good. Anymore, it'll just turn into Nebraska is terrible. I look there's not very many teams that will be up 38-0 at halftime on Nebraska, if any. You're right. They were dominant. The line of scrimmage, the offensive line were road pavers. The defensive mix, some of those defensive looks I've never seen before from us. The third. What about the third down speed? I guess what's a draw to the outside by Justin Fields? Where, what, what's that even
Oh,
about?
that was a beautiful play. Anybody that is I know Ross Fulton was probably at home, just like he probably had a permanent smile on his face the rest of the game after that play.
Oh, I'm sure Urban was happy. He's like, you can run them to the outside too. You can run quarterbacks to the out. Ryan, why didn't you ever show me that? I'm sure he was loving it. I was just. I mean, it looked like the coaching staff, Kyle, was as dominant as the athletes were over Nebraska, if that makes sense. When Mike Riley was at Nebraska 2 years ago and we took it to him in Lincoln, I just thought, man, these guys aren't very well coached. I even saw, I think a Nebraska fan tweeted out, Mike Riley's gone, right? So this was a just complete shellacking in every phase of the game, and all credit goes to the staff and the players. They didn't get complacent. They didn't freeze up under the lights. They even did little key things like when the crowd got real loud in the third quarter, didn't seem to phase them. They held a desperate team to fourth down and goal, held them out of the end zone while that team was driving on back-to-back drives. This game, or one more caveat, with backups in the game, some backups in the game. This game was as fine as a performance for a football performance as you'll see in from anybody this year.
Well, Johnny, and I want people to hear me out because I'm not saying this how it sounds right away, but I think Ryan Day is doing a better job with this team right now than Urban did last year, and that's not a shot at Urban. Urban is a Hall of Fame coach for a reason, but even Hall of Fame coaches, it's not sometimes a matter of them not knowing what they're doing, but you get set in your ways sometimes after you've had success for a long time. There are certain things that you believe in, certain concepts, certain schemes, and they're just certain ways of doing things. And I almost feel like Urban, understandably so, he had done things so successfully for so long, his way of doing it. That's not to say he's never changed anything, but I just think that there were clear marks on this program that he wanted to keep an imprint with. And I think that Ryan Day has come in and he has seen what Urban did right and seen what Urban did wrong, and he's tweaked a few things. And I think he has a better pulse for right now for this personnel and this team. And I think that's part of the reason they're having so much success. That's not to say Ryan Day is already as good or better as a head coach as Urban is, but I really think right now his imprint on this program has made it to the level that they're having success right now.
I think you're absolutely right. It's a good way to put it. This team is absolutely under control more than last year's team was. Part of that, I don't know if it's any fault of Urban's. He hired him, but the defensive staff has been changed, and it, for good reason, and it looks like that was the right move. But I'm with you that I have a theory that football changes and coaches need to change with it. The game moves, and I think the game spreads more and more out, and it continues to take off and leave people. Kyle, you're more of a historian than me, but I believe if history kind of serves right, the mid and late '70s, the game was even leaving the late great Woody Hayes a little bit. If you look at his bowl record and when he played teams that would spread it out a little bit, um, the game takes off and leaves. Urban was an innovator, but I think the game started to leave him a little bit. He was smart enough to bring in smart guys like Ryan Day and Kevin Wilson to run the offense. But now you have that smart, new aged offensive mind running the whole show. No loyalties really to anybody, player or coach, and he's making all the right calls. And I think it'll be a really good test this coming week, Kyle, because I try to take everything with a grain of salt. Like I tell people, I like getting excited about the Buckeyes, but I've been hurt before, so I'll pump the brakes. Um, I'm drinking the Kool-Aid. Now it'll be interesting to see a struggling Michigan State team at home. We should be heavily favored. If they come out of the gate again fired up, then you really know whatever Ryan Day is doing, bottle it up and sell it.
Johnny, let me ask you though: are you concerned about Michigan State because of this Michigan State team, or are you concerned about Michigan State because I got this question on Twitter when I posed who's the biggest threat remaining to Ohio State the rest of the season, and there were a few people say, "Well, don't forget about Michigan State." But I'm honestly curious: are you saying Michigan State because of the past troubles they've given Ohio State, or do you actually think this Michigan State team is dangerous?
I think it's probably a little more of the past troubles, and hey, they gotta look complacent at some point, don't they? Don't the Buckeyes have to let off the gas at some point? It's
You
almost
can't
like,
prove that.
yeah, I mean, it's almost like you hit me at the top of the key, Kyle, and I just hit 6 in a row. What are the odds I hit the seventh? I I don't I don't know. That worries me more than this team itself. And I absolutely do believe and it's not even close, that this is by far the best defensive front that the Buckeyes have faced. Now, I think they can win this game by 21 to 24 points, but still a lower scoring game, 34-10. But look, how's a young quarterback gonna feel when he has less time to throw than ever before? J.K. Dobbins may not be able to get off till later in the game, and he's getting hit harder than he has all year. That'll be interesting to see.
In all seriousness, I agree with you. Michigan State's front seven is nasty. They are really, really tough. Their offense has not been good this year. They looked a little bit better against Indiana, although ironically, Indiana moved the ball a little bit more than Michigan State had allowed previously. But this is a really good Michigan State defense. There's no doubt about that. I think I fully expect Ohio State at some point to struggle with one of these teams. I mean, Wisconsin and Penn State look like really good teams right now. Wisconsin's pass game finally came back down to earth this past week against Northwestern, but they've got a really good run game, a really good defense. That's going to be a tough game. Penn State, I expect to be a tough game. I still expect Michigan to be a tough game. I think Ohio State, I've come around. I think Ohio State will win that game, but I think it will be tough. I do think Ohio State has plenty of close calls coming up the rest of the season, but I got to say this. It's like we're 5 games through now, and they're winning by an average of 45 points a game, which is the highest scoring margin that any Ohio State team has had in the past 50 years through 5 games. And I just think we're at the point now where when you do this to a Nebraska, an Indiana, a Cincinnati, no, these aren't powerhouses that Ohio State is facing, but those teams are a combined 12-5 against other FBS teams. That is, if you go down the list, I posted the AP top 10 and all the records of their opponents. That's actually like second best winning percentage in the top 10. And people have this perception that Ohio State is playing a bunch of cupcakes and nobodies, but these are decent teams, Johnny, that Ohio State is just pounding. And I really, it irritates me when people think that you can only prove something against great teams, like top 10 teams. If you're beating the Nebraskas and Indianas and Cincinnatis of the world by 45 points on average, you're pretty good, Johnny.
Exactly. Exactly right. And that stat you just said, you need to circulate that around like, propaganda, like candy. I mean, you look at the opponent's records and then you can see, okay, well, how good are they? And they're playing decent. The opponents are. Indiana does have a pulse, Kyle. They're like Nebraska, but they both got destroyed by Ohio State. And Indiana played Michigan State really tough and moved the ball, like you said, against a really tough defense. Maybe they look terrible. They say Ohio State looks great because their opponents are terrible. Well, how about this one? How about their opponents look terrible because they're up against just a nasty team? Like, can't that be true?
Right.
It goes back to, people act like beating a top 15 team by 3 points, 4 points, is better than beating a top 40 team by 40 points. And I just don't think the gap is, that big. If you look at, what have other teams done? You know what I mean? You can't tell me that Alabama beating Ole Miss by, 30-something yesterday is more impressive than what we did to Nebraska and wrapped it up after 3 quarters. No way.
You could argue North Carolina is a comparable team to Indiana.
Absolutely.
And Ohio State went into Indiana and won by 41 points. Clemson had to hang on for dear life with a 2-point conversion being failed by North Carolina with a minute left to survive that game. North Carolina just got done losing to Appalachian State and Wake Forest in consecutive weeks. So, yeah, sometimes you can be impressive against mediocre, middle-of-the-road average teams. Ohio State doing what they did to Indiana is impressive. And any Clemson fan saying, well, who have they beat? Yeah, Clemson just beat North Carolina by a single point. So I don't want to hear it.
Yeah, and look, so we have 7 points of people talk about marquee wins. LSU 7 points over Texas on the road. All right, and then you have Notre Dame playing at Georgia, losing by they 4-3 something 7. Anyway, a single possession. You're telling me that either Notre Dame or Texas plays Ohio State, that Ohio State would only be favored by one touchdown over those guys? I would. I don't think so. I don't think so.
I wouldn't think so either. And that's another thing that irritates me about the, well, who have they played argument, because when you're favored by a field goal, 4 points, 5 points or whatever, it's basically a coin flip game. You might be about a 55 to 60% favorite in that particular instance, but that's a coin flip. People only want to look at games against top 10 opponents if you're a top 10 team and say, well, did you win this coin flip? if I flipped a coin one time, Johnny, and you get it right, does that mean that you have some extra special powers on
I have
coin
just
flipping?
you have just a better coin flipper than you. Go home. It's over. It's done. We don't. No more. Nope. We're not discussing it.
I mean, these games are coin flips. It's not to say you get no credit for winning, but if you're favored by a couple points and you win by a couple points, what have you really proven? So if you go out and beat a decent team 4 straight weeks by 40 points, you've proven something. Okay. And that the same thing should go for Ohio State fans looking at Alabama, looking at Oklahoma. Yeah, Oklahoma hasn't beat anybody either. But I can tell you this, Oklahoma has a really, really good offense. You don't need to wait to see what they do against Texas or in the college football playoff later in the year to know Oklahoma can score points. That's legit.
Yeah, this year's changing my mind about that a lot, and I that's why I don't use the well. Look who they did it to Texas Tech. Yeah, but they still did it, and I mean it was a beatdown. That it's not like Rutgers would go into Texas Tech and beat them by 100. So it, you have to absolutely say that winning by more than you're supposed to is a good thing, regardless of who it is against. And we seem to award teams that win just like they're supposed to, as long as that team has a rank next to their name that they beat.
Cough,
And to
cough,
me, that's
LSU.
yeah, exactly. Do you want to introduce that, Kyle? Do you want to get into
Let's get into that because LSU is the prime example of this. LSU was, what was it, Johnny? It was a 3-point favorite on the road at Texas.
I think six. I think six.
Yeah, you're right. I think it was 6. They were a 6-point favorite on the road at Texas. They won by a touchdown. Everybody and their brother started talking about how great LSU was. Now, I'm not saying LSU isn't good. I'm not saying don't give them credit for that win, but they did what they were supposed to do. They were favored to win that game, and everybody walked away saying LSU is so great, and they've been moving up every week just because they beat Texas, even though they've beaten Vanderbilt and an FCS Northwestern State since then. That's all they've done. But because of that one win, doing what they were supposed to do, like everybody continues to elevate LSU. And Johnny, like you made an interesting point. Would they have gotten the same favor if that were a low scoring game, winning by the same amount instead of winning by 44-38 or whatever it was?
No way, no how. You would have said it's the same old, can't score but great defense LSU team, always was, and Texas really can't handle the size of the SEC. They're not ready yet, and they got beat. Look, Kyle, Texas was number 9 going into that game. LSU was number 7, okay? So that's about a one possession favorite, right? Or maybe Texas was just ranked a little high because remember they struggled with Oklahoma State later. So LSU goes in, and I know if and buts are candy and nuts, we'd all have a Merry Christmas. I get it. But remember, for some reason, Tom Herman just had to go for a touchdown twice in the red zone in like the first quarter, second quarter, and you left 6 points on the field, 10 if you rounded up to the drop touchdown. But even take that away. Say LSU wins. They did what they were supposed to. But because they did it 38-45 or whatever, and not 17-24, they jump a bunch of spots. Remember that they jumped like 3 spots, 3 spots after that win. Like, oh, they were 2 positions over Texas and a 6-point favorite. Now they did what they were supposed to do, so let's jump them. I don't understand that, Kyle, because, and I agree that offensive football is more fun to watch. Because they beat them in the fun way, 38-45, and Joe Burrow went off. Now that's better than beating them 17-24. If they beat Texas 17-24 and you say you were impressed with that and you were going to move them up for that, I would have to I wouldn't want to call somebody a liar, but I have a lot of trouble believing that.
And the irony here, Johnny, is I'm not sure that this LSU team is much better than they've been in the past. They've clearly got a much better passing game. This Joe Burrow has been awesome, but they are also passing more because they have to, because the defense isn't getting as many stops right now. They're not running as effectively as they run in the past. So they have become a very pass-heavy team now. They're doing it well, but they're kind of like Ohio State last year. Ohio State had to pass the ball down the stretch with Dwayne Haskins because the run game had not been playing consistently. They weren't getting as many stops, so they had to air it out a little more. And that's what LSU is doing. I'm not sure LSU is all that much better than they've been in the past. Now, they're going to give Alabama a run for their money because Alabama's defense is struggling a little bit relative to past Bama teams. So I think this LSU team is certainly capable of winning the SEC and going to the playoff. I'm just saying I don't think that they're that much better. I think they're only getting credit because of past LSU failures.
Exactly. And to say something that doesn't make sense, Kyle, LSU is the same. They're the same but different. And what I mean by that is they're just lacking a different way. They've always been good in the past, defense and run game. Well, now their defense is suspect, their run game suspect, but their passing offense is really good. So they're the same, just different. And I'm excited. I'm as excited as the next guy for Joe Burrow representing Southeast Ohio. Probably the best football player I can think to come out of that area in many years. I think, some of you recruiting gurus may have to correct me on that. He's doing great. But if you look at the defensive ranking, LSU is 32nd in yards per play in defense, and Ohio State's second. And when you look at offense, they're like 0.6 yards, 0.65 yards, third over Ohio State. So to go over the rankings, LSU total offense, they're third. OSU total offense, they're eighth, separated by around a little over half a yard. LSU's total defense is 32nd, 4.71. Ohio State's is second at 3.54 in total defense, and that's better than both LSU and Bama. So you're telling me they're higher than Ohio State because of Texas? Because they beat Texas by 7? It's not adding up to me.
Johnny, where do you put the Ohio State offense? I ranked them the other day. I don't know if you saw this on Twitter. I had my unit ranking because I put Oklahoma 1, Alabama 2, Ohio State 3, and then I had LSU 4, and it escapes me who I had number 5 actually on the top of my head. But where do you rank Ohio State offensively in the pantheon of college football right now?
I think you got to put them 2-3, somewhere in there with the same. If anybody's ahead of them, it's Alabama and Oklahoma. Oklahoma, because we know what they do. We also know the defense they face is suspect, but like we talked about, you can tell they just have a great offensive scheme and great players. Alabama, I take our run game over theirs, and
yes,
our passing games are similar. If you give me athlete for athlete, if you say Justin Fields and his receivers, or you get Tua and his receivers, I'd probably take Tua and his receivers. So that's really close there. And I take our run game over LSU's. I think Fields can sling it with Burrow. He can certainly outrun it. So I got to have them either second or third in the mix with Alabama and Oklahoma. That was still pretty dominant. And for what it's worth, Kyle, I mean, you're seeing Fields throw it under 30 times a game. It's almost like we're just pounding the ball because we can. So the chains might not have been pulled off the offense all the way yet either.
Yeah, Fields is averaging 19 attempts per game right now. They just have not needed to throw him. For one, he's not playing the fourth quarter essentially. And for two, they haven't needed to throw very aggressively when he's in there because, hey, I mean, they're having so much success. Why throw more than you need to? And you mentioned the Alabama offense, and Alabama has, up until the Ole Miss game, had been averaging 4 yards a carry, which is really low for them. If you look at the past Bama teams, they're usually averaging 6, 7, 8 yards a carry at this point in the year. So yeah, they have struggled to run the ball, and I think that's why right now Ohio State is situated so well because Johnny, J.K. Dobbins averaging 7 yards a carry. Master Teague averaging 6.3 yards a carry. For good measure, you have Marcus Crowley coming in the fourth quarter and right now averaging almost 7 yards a carry. This Ohio State run game is legitimately as effective as it's been in several years. With the exception of everybody points to Ezekiel Elliott in 2014, and that's fair. He had a monster year. But the first half of that year, Ohio State was not running the ball all that well. They weren't beating people to death. That really came about later in the year when they just started running wild. I have not seen Ohio State running the ball this early in the season this well in a long, long time.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. The mystique of Ezekiel Elliott really was developed in the postseason of 2014, and obviously we knew what he was in 15. But yeah, Jake, I mean, two backs with around 7 yards a carry, that is ridiculous. And what's crazy is J.K. doesn't excel in the A gap. We found, Kyle, a way to get him to the outside at will. And we do it how we want. We did a lot of two tight end sets. We're pulling people around. And when he does need to go inside, he does. Master T can certainly get more of those yards after contact. Nice spell of styles there. You're right. I can't tell you a time. You look at maybe when you had the read option with Hyde and Miller, but stat for stat, I couldn't tell you that it was this good. This is a team. Yeah, why throw more than 19 times a game? And we're burning, like you said, almost every fourth quarter. It seems like Ryan Day's like, just kill the clock, get out of here.
Well, and you got Thayer Munford out there pancaking people like he's Orlando Pace, and I know Kirk Herbstreit made the Orlando Pace reference on the broadcast on Saturday, and I thought that was so fitting because Munford is just killing people out there, and you've got Justin Fields, who the scary thing about this, Johnny, I'm watching Justin Fields, who was cool as a cucumber in this huge primetime game in Nebraska, didn't look rattled a single bit right away. He was just calm, cool, and collected, and was like that the entire game. But I'm watching him, and my goodness, he's just tapping into his potential, just the very, very edge of his potential. He's not even close to being as good as I think he's going to be.
Yeah, I mean, he's got a few little things to clean up, maybe getting rid of the ball a little quicker, maybe just running when he needs to run and slide down, pulling a few throws in, like that deep ball where he overshot Olave, but every quarterback does that. I think I saw a quote where Ryan Day said, "Look, he's light years ahead of where I thought he would be," and I believe that. If you look at the kid that went to Georgia last year and this kid, and you put a different jersey on him, you wouldn't have to try very hard to say, hey, these are two completely different human beings. So yeah, if he continues to progress, this is really scary what they can do. And I think the bag of tricks from this staff is endless. They've been able to give so many wrinkles on defense, so many on offense, that when that pressure comes, that when the blitzes come, that they will have a counter to it. Kyle, we haven't seen a lot of slants. Have we thrown one bubble screen to KJ Hill all year? You know it'll come against good. Yeah, you know it'll come against good teams. I see them setting it up all the time where they put the three receivers to one side with only two defenders over there. But why show it if you don't have to? I think that like you're right. The we're just scratching the surface with how special Fields in this offense can get.
And on the defensive side of the ball, I think a lot of people are really happy that we can kill this narrative that the linebackers suck, because Pete Werner is out there killing people on a weekly basis, and Malik Harrison is playing well. Baron Browning is really coming on right now, and this is a good thing. Tuff Borland is the weak link in that linebacking core, and he's still a solid run-stopping linebacker. They're playing him in early downs. They're splitting time with Baron Browning. If he's the worst thing about that linebacking core right now, the way he's playing, the way the whole group is playing, Ohio State's in really good shape there.
They are, and with his Tuff's limits and athleticism. Well, you're not hearing his name called a lot, and last year it was for bad reasons sometimes. So that means he's not messing anything up, and he's making a play when it comes to him. When it's the play is there to be made for him, he'll take it. So yeah, they even had him matched up in the slot a few times. It surprised me. I thought they would do the Urban Meyer find the fish. I thought Scott Frost would be screaming over, look. But our defense really seemed to have that offense figured out, and it didn't get exposed or whatever. But they're moving him around. He seems comfortable. Baron Browning, I think, had 2 tackles for loss in the first half. Assisted sack and stopped the running back. It is yeah. Pete Werner is a fast guy who's playing big all of a sudden. So I can't really find a weak link anywhere. that I say, man, this guy or this position scares me, and that's the reason I don't think we match up well against the top teams. It is across the board as good of a team in the country as you'll see.
It's really, I look at it this way: the linebackers, maybe they're not as talented as some of the linebackers. The Carpenter Hawk, Kudla, or the Carpenter Hawk DeAndrea linebacking core, and Schlegel thrown in there as well. Yeah, maybe that was a more talented linebacking core. So I'm not trying to say that these linebackers are that level, but when you add them doing the job they're doing right now with that secondary, that Sean Wade third cornerback role has been genius. They are those guys back there, throwing him back there with Fuller and Okuda and Arnett. Those four are playing as well as any secondary Ohio State has had, and that's saying a lot. And then you've got Chase Young, who I think has finally exceeded the Bosa's as a pass rusher. And you've got the rest of that defensive line, which is just amazing, both run stopping and pass rush. You've got yourselves a legitimate defense that I think, Johnny, I put Ohio State defense right now number one in the country, best defense. I really believe that right now. I think that they are, and there are a lot of good defenses. I think Georgia, I think Clemson is a great defense. Wisconsin is playing really well. There are some great defenses out there, but right now, Johnny, I stand behind my thoughts after 5 games. I think this Ohio State defense right now is the best defense in the country.
Yeah, they're certainly top 3. The 2 you named would be their competition, and with the Wisconsin too. Statistically, however, I know their athletes can't match up with ours. And Michigan State's good too, but again, they're not as polarizing as they were last year. Quite on defense. Yeah, it seems like the most diverse and best mixed group, especially with all the speed back there. Clemson and Georgia can match up athletically, but I don't know that they can be, as diverse and do the things that we can do. Um, you know, it seems like we don't get anybody picked on. We have a great scheme. Sean Wade, you mentioned, he's just like an X factor that you can throw anywhere. They tried to confuse Ohio State in the one play in the pass he broke up, and I think it was he and Arnett or he and Okuda, brilliant, or maybe it was Fuller, brilliantly switched. They put the zone where one had deep and Wade had shallow, defended the pass perfectly. And, to go back to the linebackers, you might be right, Kyle. The defense might be even better than we're thinking, and the linebackers even better because the opponents we played, maybe besides Cincinnati, aren't exactly opponents that give you linebackers games to shine. We haven't played any play in a phone booth, boxy, pro style teams that much. You look at Nebraska is not going to run it right down your throat. Indiana's not. That's not their style, and so on and so forth. So I think you may see those linebackers shine this Saturday in a run heavy team like Michigan State.
And we have seen some teams just go away from the run because they don't have any confidence that they can do it against Ohio State.
Well, when you're down 35 points 2 minutes into the game, you kind of
right.
You have to abandon it. Yes, so you're right.
And you're right. That's partially attributed to not just fear of Ohio State, but also when you're down 3 touchdowns, these quick starts that Ohio State is getting out to. Yeah, you have to abandon that run pretty quickly.
Yeah, and then this defense has shown how many times, Kyle. Don't try extending the run game by going to the flat. Don't try swinging the ball out there because Okuda will take your shins out and keep them for himself, like the movie 300. It is not yours anymore. They're fierce over there. So it's really I don't know how you beat them.
There were a few times Nebraska tried the edge run against Ohio State on Saturday, and it worked like a couple times early in the first couple of drives, and after that, it just they did it a few times, and it just wasn't working. And I'm just like, hey, if that's your game plan, go with it, but that's kind of a questionable tactic.
Yeah, I mean that's who they are. So I guess they were dancing with the one who brought them, but sometimes the opponent just is you're overmatched. And like you mentioned, Chase Young, he's just such a difference maker. You can have the right play dialed up, but all of a sudden when the quarterback's starting to run for his life or the protection is blown in the run game because the defensive end has blown his man up or the rest of the D-line, it just complements everything else. So we're not really given – again, we're making teams look worse than they are. And right now that kind of feeds into the narrative that we're just playing bad teams. But like you and I are both saying, hey, look bad, we have something to do with that.
So you saw my poll, Johnny. We'll wrap up the show with this. You saw my poll: Michigan State, Wisconsin. Northwestern is in between there, but I'm not going to spend time on Northwestern. You can if you want, but Michigan State, then Northwestern, then Wisconsin. Later in the year, you end the regular season with Penn State, Michigan. Circle the games on the calendar that you think Ohio State fans should still be very, very worried about. I think those four I mentioned. I think Michigan State to a lesser degree, but I definitely think Wisconsin, Michigan State, and Wisconsin, Penn State, and Michigan. Those are the ones that I think Ohio State should definitely still be concerned about. But what games do you think are still legitimately, well, there might be some concern here?
Yeah, if the Northwestern game isn't concern at all, I guess it'll just be weirdness. Friday night, Northwestern plays defense well, but the offense, I don't see how they can even move the ball. So, I don't know. I don't even know how many Evanston holds. Can it get loud enough to rattle the Buckeyes? Maybe some weather. So that one would probably be more towards the bottom. I would rank Michigan State at the third toughest just because of being incomplete and being at home. Wisconsin be number two. Number one for me though would be Penn State because I know the speed and athleticism. I think they're faster. Besides Jonathan Taylor, they're faster than Wisconsin. They remind me a little bit of 2017 Ohio State, where they're playing with a quarterback who's, I don't want to say limited in a bad way, but limited in how he can hurt you, but can still hurt you somewhat because he can distribute. But there's a lot of speed around him, and it's the week before Michigan, and the timing and the opponent together, that's the one that I'm concerned most about. I think we're the better team. I think we're the more complete team, but you're playing a zone, you get some holds and stuff. The guys like KJ Hamler, I think, can get loose on you and hurt you. So that one to me is the one that's the one where you get Larry Johnson in his bag and make sure your team is motivated for, in my opinion.
I agree completely. Look, Northwestern, I know there's some superstition because they're a West opponent. It's a night game, a weird, wacky Friday night game in Evanston. And because it's a West opponent, because people have memories of what happened in Iowa City and West Lafayette the last 2 years. So I get there's going to be some paranoia, but Northwestern has scored 4 offensive touchdowns in 3 games against power conference teams so far. I just don't see it with that team. That they are just not very good offensively. Still a decent defense. They could give Ohio State a game, and I'm never going to say never. I'm not going to say they can't beat Ohio State, but I really would not spend much time lying awake at night worrying about that one. But I think, like you said, Wisconsin is fundamentally sound, a really solid defense, a great run game. Their pass game came back down to earth a little bit this past weekend. That's a concern for them. For that reason, I probably put Penn State as the most worryable game because I think Penn State, as you said, better athletes, a little more balance on offense right now. I could see that Penn State team being really, really tough. Not to say Wisconsin's not to say Michigan's not, or Michigan State this weekend, but Penn State is the one that I'm looking at as probably being the toughest from here.
Yeah, I agree. That one will be a fun game. That one would be especially hard if it was in Happy Valley, but I am happy that one is at home, and I know everybody's going to say Wisconsin, but Penn State's looking pretty good right now, so that one's definitely circled.
Yeah, most definitely. Well, Johnny, that's going to wrap things up. I appreciate you taking the time to join the big show here. And of course, everybody should be listening to Scarlet and Great every Tuesday and Thursday here on the Unscripted Ohio podcast. Of course, Unscripted Ohio is every Monday, Wednesday, Friday. All of our shows 5 days a week, as well as the Dog Days podcast covering the Cleveland Browns with Chris Drew on Tuesday, and the Gridiron Game Time podcast. Shane Larson covering college football every Thursday. I'm sure he's got a lot to talk about this week. He was in Lincoln this weekend for the Ohio State-Nebraska game. He's a native of Boise, back in Boise now. He'll be talking about it on Thursday, so I'm sure he's got plenty of stories to tell from that game. But, Johnny, you'll be in Columbus with me this weekend watching Ohio State, Michigan State along with Chris and some of our buddies. Very much looking forward to it. That should be a fun time this weekend.
Yes, it really should. It be I haven't been to Columbus actually that many times in my life, so I'm looking forward to the ambience of the city on a big game. And again, just want to thank the audience and thank you for having me on. Audience, if you take nothing else from this show, remember LSU set 24, Texas 17. Ask yourself if you're still impressed. And I appreciate you having me, Kyle.
Well, there you have it. You can catch Johnny on Twitter at ScarletGreatJL. He is Johnny Bullet. He is the co-host of the Scarlet and Gray podcast. You can check me on Twitter at KYLAM8. Check the show, Unscripted Ohio 1 on Twitter. That's going to do it for us. I'll be back on Wednesday. We'll have plenty of preview of the Michigan State game the rest of the week. And, of course, Johnny and Corey will be on Scarlet and Great on Tuesday and Thursday. That's going to do it for us, everybody. Have a great week.
You can get new episodes of Unscripted Ohio on Mondays and Fridays exclusively at BuckeyeGrove.com or anytime on SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play, or Stitcher. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date on all things Ohio State.